Hey, folks, thank you for joining me. I'm glad you're here for another week of political therapy because we've got a great session for you this week. We're going to be talking to an actual doctor who is from the group Doctors for Responsible Gun Owners. And it came to me from an article that I was reading in of all places, Natural News. You know me, I'm a nut freak for natural things. And so I was reading Natural News, and this article popped up, and it was called Pro-Gun Physicians Group Advises Gun Owners Do Not Have to Reveal Info About Their Firearms to Their Doctors If Asked. And I thought it was a kind of an intriguing article, so I read into it, and they were talking about this group, Doctors for Responsible Gun Owners. I've heard of the group before. I know that they're affiliated with the Second Amendment Foundation, I believe, is the other group that they're affiliated with, and we'll talk about that when we get our guest on here. But one of the things that I found interesting is that because 1/5 of our economy was taken over under the Obama administration, and that was the healthcare industry, a lot of laws have come out where the doctors are asking us a lot more questions, and not just the doctors, but the administration and the nurses that you see before you even get into the doctor's office. They're asking you a lot more questions about your personal life than they ever were before. And a lot of this is because of the government's intrusion into our healthcare system. And so I thought it would be good maybe to have someone who is not only involved with the organization, the Doctors for Responsible Gun Owners, but to have someone on who is also a healthcare professional. And so that's why I asked Dr. Robert B. Young, who's an MD, a psychiatrist, and he practices in Pittsford, New York, and he's an associate clinical professor at the University of Rochester School of Medicine and is a distinguished life fellow at the American Psychiatric Association. And with us right now is Dr. Rob Young. Dr. Rob, can you hear me?
Hello, Mr. Rob. I can hear you. How am I for you?
Actually, you're coming across pretty well.
Okay, good. Well, I just want to say what a pleasure it is to join up with one of my old distinguished movie star colleagues, Robert Young and Robert Taylor. I think we can get something going there.
You are dating yourself if you know who Robert Young is, and I thought that was interesting when I read that article and I looked at the group and saw your name there. I thought, Robert Young, that used to be Marcus Welby, you know? And so,
right.
Yeah.
Right, and if for some of your... you have to be older to remember Robert Taylor, but for people who are around in the 80s, my tagline is, I am a doctor, even though I don't play one on TV.
There you go.
That's from an old Sanka commercial Robert Young did.
The old Sanka commercial, yeah. Robert Taylor, the one movie that anyone ever really remembers if they're over 50 or 60 is the Ivanhoe movie that he was in. So your claim to fame with Robert Young name is much more notorious than my namesake.
Better known. Instead of, yeah.
So you're a psychiatrist, and I found this to be very interesting because this is something I've been making a claim on our show, is that the medical industry has been used by the government in many different times throughout history, especially the psychiatric industry, to take guns away from law-abiding citizens. And in fact, in Washington State, they just passed a measure called 1639 where they set up a board to review people's past mental evaluations so that they can be allowed to get a handgun license. And so I was wondering if maybe you could address some of that for us and my listeners.
That particular provision is just horrendous to me. It's not going to work, and everybody on our side of it, which includes our parent organization, the Second Amendment Foundation, which is based in Bellevue, Washington, and besides doing many things of enormous national import, of course, works very much more closely with issues in Washington State itself. They've been very involved in this. The whole idea about reviewing people's mental health somehow in order to approve their assumption of a right in this country is abhorrent anyway. The point that government should have the right to review much of anything about that is abhorrent to most of us. But this is a particularly difficult problem. First of all, mental health professionals customarily have always been the people most invested in maintaining confidentiality for their patients and clients. That is not going to lead to easily accessing people's mental health records anyway. On top of that, if you could somehow cure all mental illness in the United States with one stroke at one time, it probably would eliminate no more than 4% of all shootings that we deal with each year. So it's not a big part of the issue, no matter how you cut it. Finally, of course, people who need mental health treatment have been able to get it more and more easily through these decade by decade, because gradually the whole notion of having a mental illness is getting less stigmatized, which is very important. These are treatable just like any other illness, and it's important that people feel perfectly comfortable seeking help.
Hey, doctor, could you speak up a little bit for us? You're getting a little bit lower on us as you go on.
I apologize. Okay. Thank you. It's important that people feel free to seek treatment and not stigmatized, and with no risk from getting it. And if people are made aware that any mental health contact could be discovered by some government, and it might influence their rights for anything, including keeping and bearing arms, that is going to put a pall over seeking treatment for many people. So there are so many things wrong with this, beginning with the constitutional issue, but also all these practical and medical issues, that it's horrendous, and it's not going to help anyone in any way.
And I agree with you 100%. The direction that it's going. But let me ask you to, if you could, you're in the industry, and you probably are very well aware of all the nuances that have been going on since they have taken over the healthcare system in this country. We've gotten government more and more involved. Do you see them actively intruding into our healthcare history as a way to make these type of claims to prevent us from not only our Second Amendment rights, but any of our rights? Do you see this something that is actually actively going on?
Well, it is going on. I wouldn't say it's because government per se is that deeply interested in our individual histories, but particularly with the initiation of Obamacare, which had general standards for care that would have to be met by any insurer offering policies. These standards of care then fold into all of the electronic medical records that are, by and large, are the primary way of keeping records now in healthcare by most professionals. And with these records end up the companies who write the software for these end up trying to add everything into it that might be of any interest to any provider and to any payer, because the insurers get to review the records of their insureds on the supposition that means they're ensuring the quality of care. What happens then is one particular question keeps showing up in all of these electronic medical record software programs. Are there guns in the household? Because too many of our colleagues in medical professional associations have made that an issue. Bypassing the issue itself, then we find, though, that in almost every medical record, that question is there, and at the very least, staff push people to answer it, and sometimes the doctors or the primary professional. That's irrelevant to anyone's medical care, unless maybe they present with a shotgun wound, with a gunshot wound, not just a shotgun.
Right.
And that would be 99.9% of the time irrelevant. And people have every right not to answer any question they're uncomfortable with, doctors and health care institutions have no right to turn someone away just because they don't want to answer questions that are irrelevant.
And that's
the risk there, though, is that so many people will answer this thoughtlessly that then everything is reviewable by whatever state health agency or insurance company, and ultimately could actually lead to a majority list of people who own guns. And that, of course, is a direction we do not want to see going.
Absolutely not. And as you said, some people who may be naive or who may be easily guilted into doing this sometimes will not realize that they have a right to say no, and they'll voluntarily give this information even though they're a little bit hesitant of doing so. And a lot of times the people will think, and I've seen this happen, in especially when people are in the doctor's office and they're getting government handouts or they're getting subsidies, such as any healthcare programs. They're afraid to buck the system, and so therefore they're almost guilted into giving that answer. Do you see that happening a lot under this scenario?
Yes, and it's not only those issues, but simply the fact that as physicians, we are seen as important authorities in society, as necessarily trustworthy, and that whatever we ask should be answered, and whatever we say is the correct thing to do. That's simply not the case about this question, though.
Right.
And the problem is that people would be inclined to go along with it, even if they normally might not say to another acquaintance, "Yeah, sure, I've got 6 guns, and this is how they're stored," and stuff like that. People really shouldn't answer this question. Now, it's each individual's choice, of course. There may be people you're perfectly comfortable with saying that to.
Right.
But the bigger risk is the global recording of this information, and ultimately, years down the road, what might happen to it. My advice is you don't have to answer it. You can say no if you do not want them to know. That's up to you. You can leave it blank. Many people say, well, I've got some advice for you on how to practice medicine. Would you like that? Which is equally fair.
Right.
Yeah. Very few doctors, unfortunately, have any true shooting experience. Our profession is mostly urban trained, and that's where you get the people who are afraid of guns.
Right.
And those of us who had the good fortune to grow up in more rural areas of this country know better, and are very upset about the way that the vocabulary has been manipulated and abused. Gun safety has nothing to do with depriving people of firearms. It has to do with how you handle your firearm.
Right.
Safe storage is whatever keeps it safe from people who should not have it until you need it when you or someone you want should have it.
Right.
There are no cookie cutter definitions to this, and not least is depriving people of their rights and their possessions any way to help our nation's shooting problems, because it makes no difference in the end to any to suicides, to homicides, or to accidents. We could talk about that side of things if you want, but the bottom line is it's none of their business.
Right, and I do have a couple, and I would like to talk about that, and I would like to go back to something you mentioned, but I have to go to some commercials if you have time to hold on until afterwards.
No question, Rob. I'll be here.
You got it, and with that, we'll be right back.
I'm the third generation of our family-owned and operated business, Ragin' Coffee Company. For a quarter of a century, we have been providing some of the best coffee around. We are NOP certified organic by Oregon Tilth since 2007. We make it easy by offering free shipping from our website, RaginCoffeeCo.com. That's RAYJEN CoffeeCo.com. You can find the packaged coffee at Bandon Coffee Cafe, Coastal Mist, and McKay's and Bandon. Give it a try. Ragin' Coffee. You'll be hooked.
The RV business is booming at the Boomin' Y, and Gibbs RV is looking for nice pre-owned RVs to consign or buy. Gibbs RV makes it so simple. They will come to your location, give you a fair appraisal, and help take care of all the paperwork. It doesn't get any easier than that. So let the professionals at Gibbs RV take the hassle out of selling or consigning your RV. Stop by and see them today at 1845 Ocean Boulevard in Coos Bay by the Big Boomin' Y in Empire, or check them out at gibbsrv.com.
Stop in today to the all-new one-stop gun shop, Hole in the Wall Gun Shop in Coos Bay. Your area leader in quality firearms. Hole in the Wall Gun Shop proudly features the top brands of new and used handguns, hunting rifles, black rifles, antique and collectible guns, ammo, mace, and more. Gun cleaning and repair, expert advice, and handgun safety classes for concealed carry permits are offered too. So stop into Hole in the Wall Gun Shop across from Cumyons on Highway 101 South in Coos Bay. We buy, sell, or trade.
We're back in session. It's the Rob Taylor Report. And here he is, Rob Taylor.
Hello, everyone, and I want to thank you for joining us. We are talking with Rob Young, MD. He's a psychiatrist who's been practicing for several years, and he's also with the group Doctors for Responsible Gun Owners. And before the break, we were talking about a couple of things, and one of the things that I thought was interesting that Rob had mentioned was that there are a lot of doctors out there, a good deal of them, and I know this because I was an optician, and I managed a doctor's office, and I worked for many different ophthalmologists because I was in the wholesale industry, and so I made glasses for the whole entire region for all the ophthalmologists. And not all doctors are created equally, just like everyone else. And so some of the doctors were very anti-gun, and some of the doctors were very pro-gun. And I found that a lot of the ophthalmologists were very pro-gun doctors. They were hunters. In fact, the gentleman that I worked for was a big game hunter who went all over Africa and South America hunting all kinds of wild and exotic animals to put up on his wall. And so and I was lucky enough to work for these men because they not only were they good businessmen, good capitalists, but they also taught me that it's a right to make sure and stand up for your Second Amendment rights. And not a lot of doctors will do this. And so I was fortunate enough to work with some who do. And Rob, so I wanted to ask you, how do you find working in this industry as someone who comes from your side of the aisle, if you know what I mean?
Oh, I'm very happy to be a physician, and particularly a psychiatrist. This is one egregious fault of our medical professional societies, taking on hoplophobic attitudes that have been endemic in it since the 1980s. I spoke at the AMA once on a panel of otherwise pro-gun control doctors, and got a number of almost hostile questions from the audience, but my response to one doc who asked me why, when my own professional associations, the AMA and the American Psychiatric Association, say guns are bad, why don't I take their word for it? And I just assured him that despite this big problem that they have, they do a great deal of good in the world for us and our patients. And I'm not going to give up on them just because of one thing, and he shouldn't either. That's not the question, the answer he was expecting, of course.
Right.
But that's the point. This is a real specific problem. It's why this organization was founded in 1994 to provide a voice for people in healthcare who know better about this, to critique the really lousy pseudo-research that comes out on the subject. Any good research finds that owning guns overall is either a benefit or certainly no harm to society, legally, responsibly. That's why responsible is in our name, Doctors for Responsible Gun Ownership. And we are heard. We are the place media go to, like you, when they realize maybe there's another side of this. We contribute to amicus curiae briefs for court cases. That included Heller, McDonald, Emerson, the Florida Firearms Owner Privacy Act. We have testified before various legislatures, beginning in 1994 by our founder at Congress's Judiciary Subcommittee on Appropriations, I think. This is partly where the Dickey Amendment came from.
Right.
Prohibited the CDC from promoting gun control, which it was doing actively at that time. I would like to be sure to let people know, if they're interested further, to please go to our website, which is www.drgo.us. There they can find, right on the top of the front page, in fact, a link to the article you got interested in, that Natural News got interested in, what to do when your doctor asks about guns. Also, there's a big project we have been working for the last 2 years, which is to identify healthcare providers of all kinds who are not anti-gun, who respect their patients' rights to keep and bear arms, and who want to be referred people who are looking for doctors like that.
Oh, but do you know offhand if you have any in Oregon?
I know how you can find out.
Okay.
Go to our website, click on that particular link, and it will take you to one other a sublink we have called DRGO. No, I'm sorry, excuse me, wrong. 2adoc.com, 2adoc.com. That's at the very top of our homepage, drgo.us.
That's a good resource.
We will connect patients with gun-friendly providers. Now, we want to invite anybody listening to you who's in healthcare, who's interested, to please come to our page and sign up as a provider. And people contact us every day, multiple times a day, from all over the country, looking for a variety of providers who will respect them. So we're the only place in the country that can do this for people. And we, besides our activism, our judicial and legislative work, are constantly critiquing bad research from the anti-gun crowd. We think this is a very important thing to do on a one-to-one basis. So we would really hope people will take advantage of it on both sides of the doctor-patient relationship.
One of the articles that I noticed that you had written was talking about how many times a gun gets used in defense of someone's life. And I know for myself, not only with a gun, but with a knife one time, I had just by showing the weapon, I was able to stop someone who was trying to do harm to either someone else or to myself. And I was wondering if maybe you could comment to that.
Oh, I would love to comment on that. Two things. Gary Klecks, a very distinguished researcher from the University of South Florida, started this research in the 1990s, and some very interesting things happened thereafter. He did a reasonably good survey demonstrating that up to 2.5 million times a year, someone or different people successfully, not always successfully, but mostly, of course, defended themselves using a firearm. Now, that means, according to much later research by John Lott, that in 98% of those occasions, it simply had to be shown. The trigger was never pulled. And that's the experience you're describing with a knife.
Right.
So when the anti-gunners get around to it, and they use data from crime surveys, whether it's self-reported or through the FBI, they get only a tiny, tiny fraction of the events in which somebody was either going to be robbed, beaten, murdered, raped, whatever, had they not had their weapon to hand to demonstrate that they could defend themselves. That's what happens probably a couple million times a year in this country. Don't forget, we've grown much larger. There are many, many more guns now,
right,
by 100 million or so, than the 1990s. And interestingly, Gary Klecks discovered last fall that the CDC secretly added a question to their annual surveys about the experience of people defending themselves. The numbers they got back that he discovered only last fall proved that he was right. They confirmed his findings. I would say their numbers demonstrated 1 million plus a year at the same time, but that's more than enough to vastly outweigh the number of people who are injured or killed by firearms, almost all in either criminal or suicide.
What CDC report was that?
Which one?
Well, where were they asking this question of the CDC?
They do it. The CDC has always done an annual survey about many, many health-related issues. Mm-hmm. And so they just added that question for 3 years in the late 1990s. The timing is very curious because that was about a year after Dr. Klecks' data was widely publicized.
Interesting.
And then the CDC did not publish their findings.
Of course not.
Highly unusual and completely inappropriate for a public tax-supported agency. I am convinced that they did not publish their findings because they confirmed Gary Klecks' findings. And they didn't want to confirm it. They did this survey, I think, because they were hoping they could disprove it. They couldn't, and it sat in the filing cabinet for the last 20 years until Gary Klecks found it.
Well, that is an absolutely incredible statistic, and it came from our own government record keeping. Doc, I was wondering if you might be able to hold over for another commercial break, because I got a few more questions for you, and if you could, I'd like to ask you those after the break.
I sure will, Rob.
Thank you, sir. And with that, we'll be right back.
Before you choose your adventure, make sure your 4x4 is modified and ready to reach uncharted areas. Leave your cares behind and all the work to the experts at Tom and Gigs Automotive. From diesel power to towing access, the Bay Area's top 4x4 performance headquarters will help you get ready for wheeling and down the trail. Pick up all the necessities and the I've got to have it's on the showroom floor. Get your rig adventure ready the right way with Tom and Gigs Automotive, your 4x4 performance headquarters, one block past the Boom & Y in Empire, and online tomandgigs.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Genja Cell right now is having their 50% off limited time sale. It's their half-price clearance sale. And if you order Genja Cell to get rid of bags and puffiness under your eyes, you'll also get Chamonix's brand new Platinum Tan Enhancing Body Lotion. That's a free gift. Perfect hydration, tan, and protection to rejuvenate, hydrate, maintain that bright summer glow with a lotion unlike anything you can buy in any store. So sit back, relax, enjoy the beach with the best-looking skin possible and no bags or puffiness under your eyes. They're gone. Everybody I know that's tried Genja Cell from Chamonix loves it, swears by it. Linda, Lauren, and so many others. Call now, 800-SKIN-509, 800-SKIN-509, guaranteed to work in 12 hours. Your money back guaranteed, no risk to you. You'll also get the Platinum Tan Enhancing Body Lotion free while supplies last, and if you call now, shipping is free. It's 800-SKIN-509. It's the half-price summer clearance sale at GenjaCell.com, 1-800-SKIN-509 from our friends at Chamonix and Genja Cell.
Investments and securities involve the risk of loss. Ken Fisher, founder and executive chairman of Fisher Investments.
We don't sell annuities. We'll never sell annuities. Most annuities have nosebleed level fees, don't do what the customer thinks they do, have tremendous tax problems, are hard to get out of once you're in them, and are extremely confusing.
Don't let the sound of guaranteed income lead you to financial headache. Call now for your free report, Annuity Insights, and find out why legendary money manager Ken Fisher hates annuities. Call 1-800-770-3377 and see what you might be getting into.
Anything you want to do with annuities, there's a better way to do. If you have more than $500,000 to invest, talk to us.
Get your free report, Annuity Insights, and find out the 9 questions every annuity investor should ask. Call now, 1-800-770-3377. That's 1-800-770-3377.
There's a common assumption about identity theft. A lot of people believe it's just credit card fraud, but credit card fraud isn't the only form of identity theft. And if you're just protecting your identity by monitoring your credit and checking your bank statements, well, you could miss some forms of identity theft. Like, for example, your information being for sale on the dark web. That means somebody getting an online payday loan in your name or even someone draining your 401k. Now, thank God there's LifeLock. Now, they use proprietary technology to detect and alert you to a wide range of identity threats. You have a problem, one of their U.S.-based restoration specialists will work to fix it. Now, we can't prevent all identity theft, monitor every transaction, but with LifeLock.com, you can see more than you'd see by just monitoring your credit. Join now. You get a 10% discount just by visiting LifeLock.com/Hannity, or just call 1-800-LifeLock. Use the promo code Hannity. LifeLock.com/Hannity and save 10%.
We're back in session. It's the Rob Taylor Report. And here he is, Rob Taylor.
Hey, Coos County, if you're listening, and you have been listening, you're catching a really good show right now. We're going over a lot of good information for anyone who's a gun owner, anyone who's interested in protecting your Second Amendment rights. I found an article in Natural News that quoted from a group, the Doctors for Responsible Gun Owners. And if you are someone who's more interested in this subject, if you go to DRGO.com.us, and you can also go ahead and find out more information on this group. And we're talking to Rob Young, MD, who's a psychiatrist. And Rob, right now we're in the process of going through passing what we call the Second Amendment sanctuary ordinances throughout Oregon, because Oregon on the left coast here has been under attack by our legislature, who's been putting out one gun law that restricts our rights one after another. And so what we did is we passed an ordinance in a couple of the counties, and we're doing one here in Coos County, which tells the county government that they will not enforce any state or federal laws. And here's one of the controversial aspects of that law, is that one of the things that they will not be able to enforce is that any person who has been deemed mentally ill in Coos County still has their Second Amendment rights, and they cannot take away anyone's gun just because they've been deemed mentally ill, because of what we see some of the agencies doing as far as going after soldiers who have PTSD or someone who may have had depression in the earlier days. Do you see anything wrong with our strategy of doing something like that?
Oh, I think it's wonderful. I'm not an attorney, mind you.
Right.
But we've been following this, and I believe that if I have the numbers correctly, I think when Coos County does this, that will be half of the counties in Oregon, won't it? You're very close to that right now.
Well, what we did is they started out with passing resolutions, and more than half of the counties have these resolutions. And then we did an ordinance which was called the Second Amendment Preservation Ordinance. And what this ordinance did is it allowed the sheriff to decide whether something was violating your Second Amendment rights or not. And if he believed it did, he just wouldn't enforce the law. And which is great for counties who have good sheriffs like our county. But the thing is there were some counties who didn't have good sheriffs. So we went to the 10th Amendment Center, and we asked them to draft a law that, like the Missouri law, which would just tell the state government, but in this case the county government, that the county officials will not enforce any state or federal laws. And that's the ordinance that we're passing this year. We're going to try to pass this year in about a dozen or so counties.
Yes. Well, sheriffs are accountable to the people who elect them, and that's the people of the county. And I find myself feeling very proud of those sheriffs who make their duty to the Constitution first, along with their duty to the people who elected them, over state legislators removed, in many cases, from the realities of many of those counties, who take it on themselves to pass laws that appear on the face of them to be unconstitutional. So I can't tell you if it's a good strategy, but I can tell you, watching from a place like New York, I'm delighted to see it. In New York State, for example, we had this SAFE law.
Yeah.
SAFE law, which Governor Cuomo passed in the dark of night with collaborators from both parties immediately after the Connecticut school shootings in Newtown. And if you look at a map of New York State showing counties that have opposed it, you'll find that New York State is actually a red state with only a couple of blue areas And New York City, Westchester, Long Island, that complex, and Albany and Ithaca, which is where Cornell University is. The entire rest of the state has passed resolutions opposing the SAFE Act, and there are plenty of counties in New York in which sheriffs are not feeling bound to go after people just because of having been formally designated felons by a new law that is not well justified. So congratulations to Oregon.
And we're working hard, and thank you very much. I guess I might as well ask you, since I have you here and you are a psychiatrist, if you heard the beginning of my show, I always talk about political therapy and being a political therapist, and that was just something that I kind of made up on my own because a lot of being an activist, and before I was a radio show host, I was an activist for a very long time, and I saw the encroachment of government in many different areas of our life, and as someone who wants to limit those, to limit government, to limit bureaucracy, as kind of a therapy, I was very active in trying to do projects such as the Second Amendment Sanctuary Ordinance that fought against what I saw as government overreach. And I called that activism political therapy, and part of doing this radio show was political therapy for me. Now, telling you all that, does that make me crazy?
No, I think that's a great concept, really. I've never thought of it. Certainly, taking action on something you care about is therapeutic psychologically. It leaves us feeling more empowered. Acting helpless makes us feel helpless. So I think that's an important thing on an individual basis, and obviously society benefits. The more people get behind an important movement, the further it gets. So I really like that idea. I never thought of it before.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was just something I came up with because a lot of people, I've been doing this for 30 years. And when people call me, I always feel like I'm talking them in from the ledge because they'll call me and they'll go, "Oh, Rob, the city's raising water rates and I can't go and pay anymore." And "Oh, Rob, they're passing more legislation, And so a lot of times I feel like I'm almost doing the job of a therapist and trying to tell people, there's other things you can do. You know what I mean?
Oh, yes, there are. Yes, and the more people who get out there and speak up for their rights, the more their rights and all of ours then are going to be respected. It's a very important thing.
I absolutely agree with you. We're almost getting a little bit closer up here before I had to take another break. And before I do, could you tell us anything that you would want to reach out and tell my audience here in Coos County?
Coos County is pretty rural, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so people grew up there with guns.
Yes, we did.
Okay, so I think from that point of view, I could only reiterate that you all know much better than the average urban-trained, urban-sourced doctor what gun safety means. You practice it every single day with every single person you come across, and you don't worry. You don't have to worry about it because you're so good at it. You know the rules of gun handling.
Right.
Don't have to repeat them. And you are the experts. Doctors who have a theoretical position on that guns must be bad because so many people who are shot by, who have gunshot wounds get hurt and die. But that doesn't apply to any particular individual legal gun owner. Every time a gun shoots someone, it's because someone pulled the trigger at the wrong moment or for the wrong reason. That's the entire issue. It's not you. It's not how you and millions upon millions of Americans manage to live every single day without any risk or any harm from what others consider the devil's instrument. The whole thing is absurd when you stop and look at it, and you know that.
Right.
That's what I would say to your listeners, besides check us out at drgo.us.
All right. And Dr. Young, I appreciate you for joining me today. It was very informative, and maybe we'll have you back again if you would be willing to entertain that idea.
I'd be delighted to, Rob, anytime, really. We don't have much of a budget to send mail out to everybody in the country. We depend on our media colleagues and coworkers in activism to help us get our message out. We think it's very useful. We're a national organization. We're very active, and we appreciate you doing this. We appreciate all your listeners who will check us out and whom maybe we can help.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Doctor, and we'll be talking to you again. And with that, we'll be right back.
All right. So long.